Warning, this video will contain major spoilers for nearly all of the Danganronpa series. Proceed with caution. Junko Enoshima, the Despair Queen herself. One of the most iconic characters in the entire Danganronpa series, and quite the iconic villain. This is in part due to her chaotic and unique personality. She is also quite iconic due to the fact that she is one of the most confusing characters ever put in a visual novel. You may think her motives are clear at first glance, but the deeper you look into her, the more you see how paradoxical she is. Today, my goal is to examine Junko's ideology of despair, and shine a light on how contradictory yet straightforward it is. Strap in, because this is going to be a confusingly wild ride. So, to start off, what exactly is Junko's ideology? Junko believes in spreading suffering, as well as intentionally inflicting mental and physical pain upon yourself. She refers to this as despair. Junko is an extreme sadomasochist. Not only does she take pleasure in feeling despair, but she also enjoys seeing others in despair. Despair is the only emotion Junko enjoys, and as such, wants to feel as much of it as possible. Thus, she attempts to plunge the world into despair for her own pleasure. But where do these beliefs come from? How did she gain a love of despair in the first place? To answer this question, we must not only dive into her past, but also look at her true talent. Junko and her sister Mukuro grew up in a horrid environment. It is implied that they were homeless for most of their childhood. Growing up in such conditions, all Junko knew as a child was despair. She even states that she regretted her own birth. That's how bad her living conditions were. I believe that as a child, in order to cope with constant despair, Junko learned to enjoy it. Rather than be crushed by the weight of negative emotions, she turned these negative emotions into positive ones, so that she would not succumb to the hell that was her life. This means that to Junko, despair was something to seek out and give to others. We can use this reasoning to infer that since Junko views despair as a positive emotion, giving despair to others is Junko's form of affection. Once we consider this, some of her actions start to make a lot more sense. Why would she want to force her classmates into a killing game? Because this is her showing her love for them. Forcing them into the killing game is the highest possible honor she can give them. After all, these are the people she spent her teenage years with. People she has bonded with immensely. This logic also explains her reasoning for killing both Mukuro Ikusawa and Yasuke Matsuda. Both were people she loved, and to kill them would be Junko's ultimate act of love towards them. In fact, Junko says herself that she was jealous that Mukuro died knowing that her sister killed her. Keep in mind though, Junko does know that what she is doing is wrong. She even lampshades this on occasion. Now, the biggest reason for Junko's love of despair lies in her talent. Junko is the ultimate analyst. She is able to analyze others and predict their actions in mere seconds. This gives her the ability to make near-perfect plans, as she is able to predict exactly how everyone involved will act. Nothing is able to surprise her. And herein lies the problem. If you knew how everything was going to turn out in your life would be extremely boring. Since Junko is able to predict everything, she can never feel excitement. She already knows every action that everyone around her will take. Junko is in a perpetual state of boredom. This is shown through her constant changes in personality. If she uses one persona for too long, she will get extremely bored. In order to keep her life exciting, Junko has to find something she cannot predict. Over the years, Junko found out that the one thing she cannot predict is what people do when confronted with true hopelessness: despair. This, combined with Junko's childhood, makes her a full-on despair addict. Now, of course, none of this justifies her actions in the slightest. One of the things you have to realize if you want to understand Junko's ideology is that it is totally meaningless. She is only doing it just because she can, and because she finds it fun. Junko feels a need for constant fun and excitement. In situations where she can't get entertainment from inflicting despair on others, she turns to inflicting despair on herself. This partially explains her actions in Danganronpa 0. Junko has not been getting enough despair lately, and as such, wipes her own memories so she can inflict the utmost despair on herself. Although Danganronpa 0 also worked as a test trial for the Class 78 killing game. Treating despair as entertainment is also a way Junko manages to indoctrinate her followers. Whether it be through brainwashing or just manipulation, a common theme is Junko teaching people to love despair. This can easily be seen in Junko's closest follower, Mukuro Ikusaba. Mukuro reacts in pure delight when Junko tries to kill her in Danganronpa 3. She takes pleasure in knowing that her own sister is willing to kill her, and happily accepts any insult Junko dishes out. She sees Junko's abuse as a form of affection. To Mukuro, Junko trying to make her suffer is just a form of love. We also see Junko forcing the love of despair onto others during the brainwashing of Chisa Yukizome. Junko brainwashes Chisa by forcing her to watch videos of others being killed, all the while stimulating areas of her brain that will make her feel pleasure. Junko essentially conditions people into associating pleasure with despair, and thus makes them mindless despair addicts, willing to do anything Junko wants. Something I find very interesting about Junko's ideology is just how paradoxical it is. The very concept of enjoying despair is contradictory. If you enjoy suffering, then are you really suffering? Similar to this issue is Junko's concept of hope. Throughout the Danganronpa series, it is stated that hope and despair are mortal enemies, polar opposites, black and white. However, sometimes it seems like Junko hopes for despair. Junko herself lampshades this in Danganronpa 0. As much as she might say that she will never give in to hope, Junko can actually be seen using hope quite a bit. At the end of the first Danganronpa, Junko loses and executes herself. She gives the cast a fair chance of winning the killing game in hopes that they will defeat her, and she will experience the despair of her plans crumbling. Another instance where she hopes for despair. By letting herself lose, she is fueling hope, because fueling hope is her despair. Confusing, I know. This part is the section where we get into the philosophical fancy talk. We can compare Junko's despair to two philosophical concepts, as despair is Junko's way with coping with these issues. The philosophy of nihilism and the Buddhist concept of dukkha. Nihilism is the belief that life lacks any meaning. This directly ties in with Junko's worldview. She too believes that life has no meaning and thus uses this as an excuse to commit atrocities. Her reasoning is that if life has no meaning, spreading despair is simply giving life meaning. Without despair, Junko's life would have no meaning, and all the power she has built up would be for nothing. Dukkha is a Buddhist concept that states that life is suffering, and no matter what, life will always be suffering. As I said earlier, Junko uses despair to cope with this. If she simply takes suffering and makes it pleasure, then it is no longer suffering. Junko has found a way to subvert and eliminate dukkha, but unfortunately, this causes her to hurt others who do not share her worldview and would rather not suffer even more than they already are. Junko has no problem spreading despair to others because of her superiority complex. She acts as though she knows what is right, and if you disagree with her, you are completely wrong. In Junko's world, there is no room for disagreement of any kind. Either you are with her or you are against her. This is why she wishes to spread despair so much. She sees herself as having the right ideology and others being ignorant. She wishes to enlighten others to what she believes is right, yet recognizes that what she is doing is wrong. This is why I think Junko tries to create Junko Land in Danganronpa 2. Junko wishes to transfer her consciousness to everyone in the world so that no one will be able to see what she is doing as wrong. Everyone will finally understand her, and she will finally understand everyone. How Junko relates to others actually creates another contradiction though, as is to be expected at this point. Junko does believe she is superior to everyone, but this causes her to become isolated. Because of her superiority complex and her love of despair, Junko is unable to relate to others. She cannot understand her fellow classmates' hope. The only terms she is able to relate to them on is despair. Thus, she decides to spread despair. If she makes her classmates feel despair, she will be able to relate to them, since she has experienced so much despair already. We can see that Junko's spreading of despair serves two purposes. By making others accept her ideology, she is able to make them relate to her, and by causing others despair, she is able to make herself relate to others more. So, that was a look into the wacky yet terrifying world of Junko Enoshima. I hope this video helped shed some light on her beliefs, but I have the feeling it will create more questions than answers. I hope this video has given you some more appreciation of Junko. I can't stand it when people just peg her as a shallow despair addict. She truly is a character with a lot of depth. Anyways, this is CJ Max signing off. Have a nice tragedy.